Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me on Between the Covers. My name is Bradley Shaw, and tonight I'm talking to children's book author Steve Herron. Good evening, Stephen. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Bradley. And what about yourself?
I'm good. Yes, we're on either side of the continent. So for viewers of the film, Steve is in WA side, and I'm on the eastern seaboards in Victoria. So we're talking about Steve's new book. It's called 1,000 Snapshots, which is a beautiful story Stephen has compiled. So I'll let him tell you more about it. So please tell everyone watching about 1,000 Snapshots.
What can I tell you about a story? It's a story that probably started 40 years ago. And when you talk about research for writing a story, the research is my experience working with children over 40 years and their stories. Most of my work with children was in social and emotional well-being and pastoral care. So I got to hear lots of stories from kids, and those stories stayed with me. And I suppose they oozed out in the writing of this particular book, which is my second middle grade novel. And one of the characters from the first middle grade novel intrigued me so much that I thought the second novel should be about her. So her name is Maddy. She's just a regular 11-year-old girl. She calls herself an independent child, not a girly girl or a tomboy. She gets a bit upset if people call her a tomboy. But it's a story about her pre-adolescent journey. She has some tough things to handle in her life. Her father died in a car accident 4 years before this story takes place. And so she's struggling with that milestone in her life just as she's hitting puberty. And also she's struggling with friendships and bullying and online stuff and relationships just in general. And the story really is her taking her journey to the extent where others can share that with her. I think the reader will champion the journey with her. One incredible thing that I like about the story is it's called 1,000 Snapshots, and at some stage she makes a decision to take 1,000 photographs using an Instamatic camera given to her on her 8th birthday. And these are 1,000 photographs of memories in her life, special moments that she won't get to share with her dad, but she wants to put them on the wall in her, what she calls her studio. And the story takes place from around about the photograph number 978 right through to photograph number 1,000. So that's the story. It involves a little bit of cultural stuff as well, because she encounters a djidi, which is a willie wagtail, which becomes a metaphor for her journey as well as she tries to photograph this willie wagtail. And there's some good relationships between her and her friends in relation to that willie wagtail.
Wonderful.
I think I pretty well covered it for now.
Yeah, that's very comprehensive. Thank you. So was it a long process to write this book, like from planning it out, plotting it out? As you said, it evolved from the other book, so you sort of pulled that character out, gave her her own vehicle. So was that hard? Was that hard to sort of identify her and create that?
Not really. When I wrote the first novel, I sent it to a publisher, and they said, because it's a first-time novel, we really would need a second or a third novel for us to be interested in a series. And I only wanted to write one novel. And but after I'd finished the first novel, I felt there was another story. Her story needed to be told. And I related to her character because of the amount of children that have spoken to me about the kind of things that happened in her life.
Yeah.
I first looked. I looked in my computer the other day, and the first manuscript, the draft manuscript I had for the story, was in 2016. So it was 5 years ago that I first started penning the story. So it's taken 5 years to get there to this particular stage.
Was it difficult to create over that time? Was it hard to plot for her line of a story in the full sense of a book? Or, obviously you had the elements, but was it hard to blind and to create the journey?
At times it was. Firstly, because the story originally was called Djidi, which was about the willie wagtail.
Yeah.
Djidi is the local Noongar word for willie wagtail in Western Australia, and so I was trying to focus on her story, but include the djidi in it, and it didn't gel right because it didn't feel like there was enough about the djidi.
Yeah.
And that's where I started moving and changing the whole idea of the story. Once I picked up this idea of her taking these photographs, which was already there, but I focused more on that concept.
Yeah.
And that came about because an 11-year-old girl I met some time ago said to me, Steve, life is like you taking pictures. Some are bad and some are good. So make sure you take the shots of the ones that have a good effect on you.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's a great quote. I'm going to use that in the book, and that's going to be Maddy's kind of punchline, her own quote for the book.
I like that. That's really good. Yeah. So did you get help and feedback? Obviously, you said you spoke to children and stuff, and particularly the girl taking photos, as you said. But was there other influences, like any people you knew or people you didn't know well, but still were inspiring enough to help you create, the elements of the book you needed?
Yeah, look, none of the characters are based on real life people, but the experiences of the characters are based on the real life experiences of people that I knew.
That's good.
I had a couple of people beta read the book. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. In particular, there is a chapter about Maddy going through her first period. And I had to do a lot of research to understand what happens there. And I sent that off to a friend of mine to fact check it for me, and got some interesting information, which I won't go into now, but I wanted to make sure I got that correct in the story.
Of course.
So that was really helpful. Yeah. And and a couple other people in the journey who have read the story, including an 11-year-old girl who read through the story as well with her mother. The two of them read it together, just to make sure that you're on the right track.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's a wonderful book, and you've done a great job, writing a young girl. It is probably really one of the hardest parts as a male writer to do stories on the opposite sex, to make sure that it's authentic, as you say, and that you understand being that age or being that gender is really good. And you did a great job.
That frightened me a bit.
Well, it is a challenge. It is. I mean, you're up for, as you said, you've taken time to make sure you're conscious of the research you needed to get, back and readers to help you, because your authenticity and your credibility, of course, as a writer, is online when you're outside of your, I guess, known comfort. So tell me more about your overall writing process. So this book took you 5 years, but you've written a multiple number of books. So how did you get into writing, and where did you start, and what did you want it to become? Was it a hobby? Was it something you really wanted to evolve more? Tell us your story about you writing.
When I was a young fella, I wanted to be a cartographer. And looking back on it now, I think it's mainly because I like the idea of seeing things from up on high. So actually, I think I wanted to be a bird rather than a cartographer, so you can actually see the lay of the land. And unfortunately, I failed English at high school. And when I left high school into the workforce, I did English again at night school back in those days and failed again. So it surprised me that, later in life, here I am writing books, and I still struggle with grammar. I still struggle with the written word, but I have a passion for books. I have a passion for stories and storytelling. And I think it really had a boost when probably 20 years ago, a young boy said to me, Steve, can you write a story about a boy who gets bullied? And I thought, why would you ask me that? I don't write books. But I was driving my car not so long after that along a road, and I saw some magpies on the side of the road, and they looked like they were skylarking and teasing one of the other magpies and pushing it onto the road. Yeah. And I thought, oh, look at that. Those magpies are playing chicken with that particular magpie. And I thought, hang on, here's an idea for a picture book. And I went home that night and I penned my first actual picture book called The Magpie Who Wasn't a Chicken. And it was a book about bullying. And that, some years later, I ended up self-publishing that book with the organisation that I work with. and it became probably the most popular of all the 6 books that I self-published back in those days.
Well done.
So that got me hooked, but also I found that when I was working with children, children's books, especially picture books, were incredibly helpful and therapeutic for children to be able to read stories.
Yeah.
And the best ones were ones, not didactic ones, not the self-help books, but books that actually had kids thinking, because the story was so good, that they could relate to the story. And the self-help books just didn't cut it. The kids didn't really want to read them. So my challenge was how do you write self-help books, or how do you write social emotional well-being books that kids would want to hear about? So the sense of story was really important, and I discovered that over time, and that's what I've been working on. Probably for the last 5 years, I've taken that more seriously.
Yeah, and it is a hard art. It is an art to write to a child, to write to a child's interpretation, understanding, and indulge. Like, they want to read it, they want to indulge in it. But if it's learning, they don't want it to be preachy. They want it to be enjoyable. And you're right, it is a skill. That's what we find in a lot of our books too, to help authors, find their needs and their audience and readership. Really well done. And congratulations on a great process of your career development. You've done really well. Very excited about your book.
I am very excited. I'm pumped.
Yeah, it's great. And it's coming November. So 1,000 snapshots. It's a fantastic book. Everybody watching, please grab a copy at your local bookshops or online, as I said. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to the next exciting episodes of books coming. As the sounds of it, there's plenty for readers to love. And everyone, thank you for supporting Australian authors. And Steve, good night. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Bradley. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Take care.